Hey folks, how you doing? It's Kirk Bankstead here, owner of the Monaco Brewing Company. As you can see, I am standing in front of the Oneida County Courthouse, where I just had an intake hearing, where we got in front of Oneida County Judge Sheik because to talk about me being imprisoned, and these are the charges. I was imprisoned for disorderly conduct. I was imprisoned for bail jumping, and I was imprisoned for harassment. So today's hearing was just to, get the charges from the district attorney. We had not seen the charges yet, and so we got those charges. We weren't allowed to do much of anything today, but I did want to talk about something that happened today that I believe further proves that the judicial system in Oneida County is corrupt, or they actually just adhere to a system that protects a system that is corrupt. So I was given bail today that said I could have no contact with Greg Walker, who called the police and had me and my staff arrested. Greg Walker had previously complained and sent the sheriff after me last October when he published a piece in his paper about a first grade teacher who had taught her kids a book that included a mention of a same-sex couple. He had railed against that teacher, railed against her principal. Somebody had shown me that article. And so what I did was I put his face and his general manager's face, I photoshopped them in a sadomasochistic pose, showing that, it's potential that the reason he's harassing, it was a joke showing that maybe those who harass those who teach kids about same-sex marriage might actually have sexual deviances themselves. It was a joke to kind of punch back at a guy who was attacking a teacher. He called the cops and they arrested me and put me in jail for criminal defamation, which is a state statute that should not be on the books. The reason it shouldn't be on the books is because of a Supreme Court case in 1964 called Garrison versus Louisiana, which decriminalized defamation and made it a civil problem and not a criminal problem. Meaning that if you feel like somebody has maligned your character, you can't throw them in jail. You can just sue them for money. And if they win, they get money. So that was decriminalized in 1964. It means this law should not be on the books in Wisconsin, but it still is because nobody has, appealed a criminal defamation lawsuit to the Supreme Court to the point where it's changed the law. So that is currently why I had a bail set, because anybody who gets criminally charged is released on bail. Often these cases last two years. So currently I was under bail, and the bail said that I could not threaten, intimidate, or harass Greg Walker, or I believe Heather Holmes. That was threaten, intimidate, and harass. Originally, the bail terms were that I could have no contact with Greg Walker, but we successfully argued with the judge that was impossible because he's the publisher of the newspaper, and he's a right-wing zealot who lies often in the newspaper, and I'm the counterweight to that in Monaco. I'm the only progressive that has enough of a Facebook following to counterbalance some of the lies that he tells in his paper. So just imagine, if I'm protesting, a ringleader of the corruption in Oneida County, I would be gathering protesters and going to the Lakeland Times, and I would be shouting at the Lakeland Times and Greg Walker that he's lying and that he's a cancer to the town. So how could I do that with my First Amendment right to be able to protest? How could I do that if I had a bond that said I could have no contact with Greg Walker? I mean, contact means I can't speak directly to him. which means I can't protest at him. So we got that erased from the bond terms last October. So today, the judge, this is in an aside, the judge recused himself, but he still had to set bond because I gotta just have something to go forward on. So he recused himself because somebody who agrees with me that Oneida County is completely corrupt, unfortunately was mentally ill and threatened the life of Judge Sheik in an email. And so now, because somebody else has threatened this guy's life on my behalf, he gets to recuse himself on all issues surrounding me, which I get. That makes perfect sense to me. So anyways, he's recusing himself. He doesn't want to deal with me. But he says that I can't have any contact with Greg Walker. So I feel that Greg Walker potentially could have entrapped me last Friday. He came out outside of his building at the exact same time that I was giving a speech that was protesting the corruption in Oneida County, and I obviously named Greg Walker as one of those guys. So then, ultimately, we saw Greg Walker, and I said, "Look, everyone," and I did it more boisterously than I'm doing now, but I said, "Look, everyone, this is the culprit. This is the guy. This is the corrupt dude." And everybody booed, and it was like, everybody started kind of jeering the guy, but it was from my own property. And so he called the cops, and the cops were there in like a half hour, and there were cops from Oneida County, Vilas County, the town of Minocqua, and the town of Woodruff within like a half hour. Like, they mobilized all the cops. And so a part of me was like, was this a plan to somehow get me to violate a term on my bond? Because the term on my bond said no threatening, no harassment, and no intimidation. What we were doing was simply protesting. But somehow or another, all the cops who arrested me and said I had violated a no contact bond. And I had not. We didn't have that bond. But what happened today was the judge actually put a no contact on me, which means now, if I'm talking to my audience right directly across the street from Greg Walker, and I'm saying that he is the reason why Oneida County is corrupt, because he's the ringleader, and if I direct my audience towards him and we say, hell no, Walker has to go. If we all say that to him across the street in a protest, I could be accused of bail jumping again, or I could be put in jail for bail jumping again, put in jail for 24 hours in a holding cell, which was completely mentally rough on me. So we tried to argue, saying, and it's something called prior restraint. It's like, if you put a guy in a position where he's likely to be accused of bail jumping all the time, then that's called prior restraint. You're not allowing a guy to have basic liberty, and basic liberty equals the First Amendment right to protest. So what the judge did today was he made it impossible for us to legally protest Greg Walker, and we're going to fight that in court. We're going to find some court case that says you cannot limit a protester from contact. Because Greg Walker, by the way, is the publisher of the Lakeland Times and the River News in Rhinelander. He is one of the most public figures. He's a pseudo-government official because he buys ink by the barrel. And surely he will write about what a terrible person I am in tomorrow's version of the Lakeland Times. So I am limited in my ability to respond to that. I can write on Facebook that I think he's wrong, but I can't actually organize a rally with 50 people to march up to the Lakeland Times and say, hell no, Walker's got to go. You're the corrupt guy who's leading the rest of the county into corruption. I can't legally do that now without potentially going to jail. And that is a violation of my First Amendment right to protest. So this Judge Sheik it was just a preliminary thing, but he did something bad today, and so we are going to we're going to push the envelope. We're going to make sure that I'm allowed to protest Greg Walker, and that they can't try to entrap me again. Because if I have no contact with Greg Walker and he's across the street, and he pops out, like he did last Friday, and somebody in my bar says, Greg Walker's a loser, or Greg Walker is corrupt, and and he calls the police, and the police, just because they're in thrall to Greg Walker, they just take his call, and he said Kirk broke his bond again. Even if that's not true, they could still throw me in jail. They could throw me in jail for as long as they did, and even longer. And that's continuously meaning that I'm continuously under threat of getting hauled off to jail for simply protesting on my own property, because Greg Walker's property is right across the street. So it's a technical, weird thing happening here, but it still is worth fighting for, because this whole issue relies on a false premise that I should not be under bond for criminal defamation because the statute shouldn't exist in Wisconsin, and I am under bond, and it's a sinister rule that bail jumping is a sinister law in Wisconsin because law enforcement, even if they arrest you for disorderly conduct, which they could arrest anybody for just giving somebody the bird. You could be arrested for disorderly conduct. That's considered bail jumping. And if you do it enough, it could be considered felony bail jumping, and they could lock you away and throw away the key. So this bail jumping gives law enforcement the ability to harass people of color, but in this case, harass protesters who they don't agree with or they think might be a nuisance, activists. This is insidious, and this is the reason we're going to keep fighting it. I'm going to keep pushing the envelope. I just hope I don't have to go to jail again, because I didn't like that very much. All right, that's all I got for you. We'll keep you up to date on what's going on soon. I've got a nice T-shirt that explains all of this in a nice, cool slogan that I'll talk about tomorrow. Bye.